Hello and welcome. Thank you so very much for joining us live today for our fourth and final panel in the series for this second annual Shine a Light Autistic Advocate Campaign. Our hot topic this year is accessibility. We have talked about accessibility in the workplace. We have talked about accessibility in public spaces. We did a deep dive on accessibility in healthcare last week on Thursday. And today we are talking about accessibility in education. There are so very many things that we don't get an opportunity to discuss and really talk about in the month of April, which is why I started the Shine a Light Autistic Advocate campaign last year. I wanted to elevate our voices, talk about the topics that matter most to us in the world, the things that are impacting our life, the things that are sparking our joy. Because look, we can all complain real easily. It's easy to go, oh, that is painful, that hurts. But there's so many things that get left off the table in the conversation of what's sparking our joy. And autistic joy is such a beautiful thing to share, to embrace, and to talk about what it is for you. As we move into this education conversation today, I am joined by four massive powerhouse education advocates all around the globe. We have Rinon from the Philippines, Jacki Edry from Israel, Simon Preston from the UK, and my NeuroDrive education team member from the West Coast, Carrin Gilmore, and I'm Carol Jean Whittington. I am the founder of Mind Your Autistic Brain, and I'm here on the East Coast in the US. We're going to get kicked off, get started, and we are going to talk all things education today, what those accessibility barriers are, and the things that we are doing in the world as advocates to help change that.
Hi, I'm Carol Jean, late identified autistic ADHD human, and your host of the Mind Your Autistic Brain talk show and Burnout Restoration Unveilers community. You're about to experience the new way to thrive as a neurodistinct brain and body by getting off the chronic cycle burnout loop for good. By unveiling your authentic self, defining what thriving feels like for you, knowing your burnout signpost, so those top 20 burnout warning signs are a thing of the past, and stepping into your best life as the creator and leader you are meant to be. Get ready, because this is where we go against the mainstream, say no to outdated self-care tips, and we say yes to who we are in order to create an energized, authentic, peaceful, and harmonized world. Welcome to Mind Your Autistic Brain.
Oh my goodness. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Fantastic advocates. We had a comment drop. Our co-advocate in the campaign, Charlie Hart, is in the house today. Hey, Charlie. Thanks for joining us. Guys, we are so excited to be here talking about this. We were all backstage, like sharing and connecting, and everybody is really hyped for this conversation today. So we are going to kick off the conversation because I think accessibility, it's like so many things. It's a word. And until we can start discussing and talking about what that word means to us, we can't really connect and start to come together to understand our different perspectives. So as we kick off the discussion today, I would like to start with asking each one of our panelists, and I'm going to go in the order I see you on my screen here, guys, what accessibility in education means for and to you. Rinon, let's start with you, my friend.
All right, so actually that's Rinon.
Rinon.
The Yes, that's right. That's right. So, yeah. So before I answer that, I just wanted to tell you that I'm still having suspicions here, and diagnosis and mental health system here in the Philippines is still in its early developmental stages. So it's really hard to get diagnosed as an autistic or as a neurodivergent for that matter. But uh I did have this anecdote from my own mother when I was young, and she actually had me tested for autism when I was 2 years old. So somehow it did click, and I might be able to detail that a little bit later. But to answer you, I would just like to share that accessibility means what accessibility means to me, and I'm looking at the root term access. If someone has access to something, it means that that person is eligible to reach or enter it. And in the context of autism, accessibility means accommodation. Autistics should be accommodated for the things that would help them do what they would love to do while being unapologetically themselves. That is, without having to mask, because we all know the term masking, right? So, basically, if we are to be make education accessible, or anything for that matter to be accessible, we should uh l- we should not let autistics and other neurodivergents mask themselves in our society. So that's what accessibility is to me.
Thank you. I think that everybody in the room can resonate. Oh my goodness. And we had our other final panelist joining us today. Hi, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. Share just a little bit, introduce yourself, tell everybody where you are in the world.
Well, I'm in Pakistan, and my name is Faiza Rahman, and I'm advocating autism and other neurodivergent conditions, and working for the rights of the people here.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you made it. I was like, oh goodness, I don't know if she can make it. Oh, I'm so glad you slid in there. Great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so Jacki, let's move to you next. You are on my screen next. What does accessibility in education mean to and for you?
It means a lot of things, but basically it comes down to providing the tools, the accommodation, the understanding and acceptance that the neurodivergent, autistic, whatever may be, individual needs to feel comfortable and to thrive and to feel as if they belong, that they're not somebody that's included sort of on the sidelines, but rather they're part of the community, and people need to do what they need to do in order to enable them to feel to thrive and to be able to succeed, and not have to deal with lots and lots of technical difficulties, sensory difficulties, or the feeling that somebody's doing them a favor to give the accommodations that they need. They shouldn't have to be working so hard to fit in, and they shouldn't have to fight school districts or whatever to receive the accommodations that they need. And I'm with Ian as well, because no one should have to mask. That's what it is in a nutshell.
I love that. And the article that you wrote for the Brains Up blog really goes in depth, and I love it. So if you have not yet had a chance to jump over and check out all of the amazing articles that have been written by our advocates throughout the month on the Brain Dump blog, you can go find that at mindyouautisticbrain.com. Jacki's article published this week. Ian has one coming out. Simon has one coming out. There are so many more that will still be rolling out throughout the rest of April. Don't miss these incredible articles by powerful advocates impacting change around the globe. Simon, share with us what accessibility and education is.
Well, for me, accessibility feels more about being able to be part of a community, just be myself, demasked, and being able to take part in everything that other people do, and be able to able to enjoy life alongside people. And in order to do that, there has to be elements of there's got to be acceptance and all the other kind of support needs and understanding of the challenges that myself and other autistic people do have. But it's not all just about the challenges, it's also about what we're good at and the things that we can really excel in. And if we're able to embed that side of ourselves more into society and into community, it gives us a sense of belonging, which then protects psychological safety. So for me, accessibility it's very much about being able to be part of that community as my authentic self.
I love that. That is powerful. The belonging, to be able to unmask, be your authentic self, be able to thrive. I love what I'm hearing as we're going around the room. Oh, my darling Carrin, Gilmore. How do you define and experience and describe accessibility in education?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me here. Secondly, It's such a funny thing because it's in my title with Neurodrive. I'm the Director of Accessibility Accommodations, right? You'd think I'd have like a right away answer. The problem is accessibility, I feel like, is getting your needs met, right? Feeling safe, feeling that comfort. I mean, I want to say ditto. Like everyone else has really covered it, but to add to it really was like, the comfort level, the ability to say, these are my needs. This is how we meet them, and this is how I can thrive, right? Because if our needs aren't met, if we're not able to feel safe, we're not able to have a comfort to be able to say, hey, like, can we do this? Or, an example I always tell people is like accessibility is having friends and access to meet people and be yourself. A lot of times within the neurodiverse community, the disabled community, there's kind of this coaching that always happens. You're supposed to be this, you're supposed to do this. And so I would say accommodating, and access really is like this idea of authenticity within that, right? So like that oneness and owning this, but also the community having to be like, it's okay if they're quirky. Like it's not harming me, like it's okay for them to be themselves and me to be myself. And I think that's something as a world we could work on for access and accommodations and all that jazz. So thank you.
Carrin, that is really powerful what you just said. We have the freedom and the ability to be ourselves, and they have the freedom and ability to be themselves. That is, that's a big one. And I think, as burnout restoration strategists here, always coming in with how do we thrive? How do we stay out of burnout? Especially as different neurodistinct brains and bodies, because it is not just our brain, it is our body, our sensory system, our nervous system. We are different in how we respond to the world. From, I guess, what we want to call the majority, but I honestly think we're the majority, folks. I really do. I think the numbers are just finally getting there to show it. We are the majority. But it's about getting our needs met. It's about that integrity gap that I talk about. And the integrity gap is not a lack of integrity. It is simply saying who I know myself to be inside isn't who I'm able to show up and be externally in the world. Those two are different. There's a gap there. And the wider the gap, usually I have discovered the correlation between the greater or the longer the burnout. So I love that all of you are talking about the belonging, the acceptance, the unmasking. Oh man, we are running to our final discussion advocate in this accessibility and education. What does it mean to you? Faiza Rahman from Pakistan, what does it mean to you?
I personally feel being included and be included in a way that your needs met and you are included to meet your own potential when it comes to education. Because most of the people are having struggle with their potential meeting up, and they are being judged for who they are not. And this is what I feel like. And inclusion, it's not only like if you have something lacking in yourself, it's more of like giving the right support at the right time and making them giving them right comfort level to excel whatever they want to in their life.
I'm really curious, and I don't know if this is something that you could answer easily, or if it's something you're like, I don't know that I can really talk about that comfortably, and that's totally okay. But I know for identification of autistic girls, that's already a challenge. What are you seeing in Pakistan when it comes to girls and identification and education?
Well, girls are coming up very few, and especially the problem with disclosure, with the cultural context, and with the demographic point of view, it's very low. And mostly parents are reluctant, especially when it comes to girls, to step out with their diagnosis and to disclose their conditions. But it's mostly considered as a condition for the privileged people, because it's demographic thing. It's also about the socioeconomic perspective. So people who are less privileged, who cannot afford, who are not aware of a spectrum and other conditions, they're still struggling. And I personally came to know in my 40s last year, basically. And yeah,
Right
so
there with you.
yeah, I'm a late diagnosed.
Well,
And
that was my next question: is how many women are you seeing discovering this late in life, like you and I?
yeah, I'm running a support group for adults in Pakistan, and there we have very few women, but it's mostly considered as the men thing. But more women are coming forward, but it's more of like the girls are reluctant at the moment because of their family pressures, and those are the kind of things. And we unfortunately don't have practitioners who can diagnose adult population. So I got I'm one of few people who formally got diagnosed, and diagnosis is not a cheap thing at the moment. Nobody can afford it easily. So these are the consequences, but it's just the kind of thing we have to speak up. We have to listen to our internal voice. And I got other overlapping conditions, and it took me good 5 years or 6 years to speak up for myself, because I was very much reluctant at telling the people because of cultural norms and how they're going to judge me, how they're going to take me if I just come up about my struggles and about my needs, about my accommodations, what I need specifically in my life. So this is happening.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in Pakistan, and everything that you're doing to share and to help bring people along to transform that social norm and narrative that's out there right now to include acceptance and understanding. Thank you so much for that. Holy cow. I mean, really, this everything that everybody has shared, I think if you've been listening on the other side, you're going, oh my goodness, I can so relate to this. And I love it because every panel has been a little bit different when I ask the accessibility question. There's common threads, but this one, this group has really talked about that belonging and that unmasking element more than anybody else, I think. I want to talk about, and I think this was something that was really important that kind of came up from all of you. You guys always spark my brain. So here it goes. You're like, oh no, Corinne's used to it. I want to talk about, if we can, if you guys could kind of sort of take this and run with it however you like. As we talk about barriers in education, I think one of the biggest things for me was that the way the education system is currently structured in the United States and in many places around the globe, um, I hit my first burnout at the age of 6. I didn't know it. I didn't know I was autistic. I knew I was an exceptional student. I have very high IQ. I'm now considered what would be called, my friend Nicole Waikunis says, you're a twice exceptional, Carol Jean. And I'm like, I don't need to be twice anything. Thanks, Nicole. Once is enough. But because of my IQ and then also being autistic and ADHD, there are a lot of challenges that I faced because my energy level and the sensory demand and the executive function demand in the classroom. I would come home from school and I would just be exhausted. And I remember, and I've talked to so many people who've had this similar experience, and I'd love to just kind of hear your experiences as you were going through the education system. What did you experience being some of the biggest barriers for you? For me, it was just this constant one activity after another. There was no transition. There was no rest. There was no, hey, we got to go outside and run around and kind of get our energy out late in the afternoon. By then I was already done. My brain had checked out. So I would love to go, and we'll just kind of go in our same order. Ian, what are some of those barriers that you experienced in your educational experience in life? And what were some of the biggest barriers that came up or stood out for you?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, Carol Jean. Because sorry, I almost code switched to Tagalog. But anyway, but yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I was tested by my mother's pedia when I was 2, And basically, because of this, I'm not sure if this was as a formal assessment. There were no documents that were given to my mom, and I think my mom wasn't. I did. She didn't um, made an effort to get those documents. But uh, when she told me that this happened, uh, she she basically wanted me to get to a school that would very much cater to my needs. And uh, I can only say this because not because not just because I'm privileged or something, but I'm not really. But it's just that I had I had a father who was once a seafarer. He's just retired a few years ago, and basically he's the one who is financing our needs here. And yeah, um, so what happened is that she was trying to get me to a school that would very much synchronize uh, with my way of thinking, or with how my brain works, because there are some schools that basically just wanted to get me to a lower level because I was young. But there are some, and there's this one school that I attended that that very much matched my needs during that time. So I have to be grateful as well for my mom for that. So I'm not sure she's already asleep here because it's already going around midnight at this point here in the Philippines. But I would just like to give a huge shout out to her for that at the very least. So fast forward, as most autistic children, or as most neurodivergent children during the past, or perhaps those kids who were labeled the odd one out, uh, I have been bullied. So one of the things that I think most of us who are neurodivergent experienced is bullying. And back in the early 2000s, the concept of children's and teenagers' mental health was small or non existent, at least here in my country. So, guidance counselors, if there are any, have very much multiple roles within the school. And just like in the case of the school that I attended, actually, it's a different one. It's now a full educational stack during that time. So, uh, basically the first school I had was that I mentioned earlier was the preschool thing, and uh, then I transferred to another school for formal education. So that's that. Now, uh, back then, guidance counselors had little to no idea about neurodiversity apart from the profound or disclosed cases. So, uh, basically those who were unknowingly autistic, unknowingly ADHD, or unknowingly neurodivergent in general, uh, were basically crammed in alongside the neurotypicals. I'm not really good at explaining that, but that in English. But basically, we're uh, we're
We call
being.
that mainstreaming here in the United States, where everybody's sort of collectively
Oh
packed
yeah.
into one classroom. And you touched on something I think is really important, and I think Carrin will probably follow up with a little bit of this when she
Mhm.
talks. Thank you so much on that, Ian, because there's this place where either, like, from my side of things, being an exceptional student, they were trying to move me up 2 grades. And our Shine a Light Autistic Advocate campaign winner this year, Janelle Johnson, she had a similar experience, and her mom did the same
Oh.
thing my mom did, which is, I think, is interesting. They wanted to move us up, 2 to 3 grade levels when we were very young. And
Oh.
both of our moms said, oh no, they can't handle that socially. They don't have the maturity level for that. They may intellectually be able to, but socially and emotionally, no way. And both of our moms said no. And my sister had learning disabilities, and my son also is autistic, and my second son has ADHD. And my eldest son also had some learning challenges in amongst all of the other things that we are in these beautiful patchworks. And they wanted to hold him back. So we did hold him back, but it wasn't, I see so often, I think Carrin can probably talk to this, where we see, educators trying to solve a problem that they see as like, this child isn't hitting these benchmarks. Well, first of all, what are the benchmarks? Are we looking at the whole child? Are we just looking at data in one area? And I think so often we see that. And for me personally, No Child Left Behind was the worst thing that ever happened to anybody that has a different way of thinking, because the bullying has escalated. My son was terribly bullied. I was terribly bullied. I think everybody in this room has probably a story or an experience of that. And when we're talking about accessibility in education, I don't think we can have this conversation without that. Ian, thank you for bringing it up. Jacki, I know you've got a whole beautiful, wonderful, glorious family of wonderfully wired folks, and education, and this has really been part of your educational career path as well as just as a mom. What are some of the biggest barriers that you've seen in education for yourself and for your kids?
Okay. Well, for myself, I was lucky. I was in a very, very good school district, and it was a long time ago, right? So there wasn't, I don't even know if people were being diagnosed for ADHD or things like that back then. And autism was extremely rare. I actually worked with an autistic kid when I was in high school, and it was like 1 in 10,000, I think, was a statistic back then. But I always had a different way of thinking, and I was also picked on. I was kind of nonlinear and spacey. That's what they would call me a space case. I wasn't very intelligent, so in the sense that I did well in regular school, but I hated it. So I always found alternative schools, and even an alternative college. There's a college in Massachusetts called Hampshire College, and basically there's no tests there, only sometimes for mathematics or something. But a person who thinks differently and does very well in that. So there's a lot of writing and a lot of things to support, and everyone creates their own major, and it was great. So that was my education, which was fantastic. I was very lucky. The only time I was picked on was I was in the traditional school for junior high school, and that was something I got up as quickly as possible. Now, the situation changed completely when I became a parent. I live in Israel. Israel, in many ways, is a very progressive country, and in many ways, we're really backwards, underdeveloped, underfunded, particularly in everything to do with education. But I think before even saying that, I'd like to say that the educational system, as a general rule, needs an overhaul, and is not suited for children in general. Kids are not meant to sit on their bums all day. And maybe it's perhaps when there was the Industrial Revolution and they needed the kids to learn how to be, function on a factory line or whatever it was, then we wanted them to be robotic. Perhaps it might have had some sense, but certainly doesn't in this day and age. And I don't think it suits any kid. And because it doesn't suit any kids, particularly when they're inundated with so much information all the time, and stimulation and screens and everything else that's going on in their brains, the teacher is definitely a boring thing, and sitting on their bums doesn't work. And it's irrelevant. And because the kids can't sit on their bums, and they say everyone has ADHD, and they want to give them Ritalin and all this other stuff to sit them on their bums. So from the beginning, even before you get into any sort of neurodivergence or neurotypical or anything, the whole thing has to be revamped, and kids should be taught skills. And each kid can easily, in this day and age, be developed and learn to manage information, learn how to write, learn how to produce, learn how to think. They don't teach to think, they teach to spit back information. Bad news, kids are not meant to spit back information, they are meant to create. And if you have to sit people down and make them spit back information, they're not in their natural zone. It creates a side of people who are having pathologies that probably aren't pathologies. It's just the brains are different. Everyone has a different brain. I don't know who it was that decided that everyone's supposed to have the same brain, but they're wrong. We're all, I am a religious woman, God-given creatures, and everyone has a different task in life, and everybody's bodies and brains are different, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So I'm all for changing the educational system so that each person can find what they need. And it's not a difficult thing to do, to teach skills and to teach values, because people need to learn to respect each other as being different and not try and teach everyone to be a clone. And if those two things are happening, then there'll probably be a lot less bullying. Values in terms of being a decent human being, values of respecting others, and if there's bullying or things like that going on, then there should be no teaching going on. It should be stop and talk about what's going on. And those are the social skills and the understanding that kids need, emotional intelligence. And if we're teaching skills and learning skills and how to learn and emotional intelligence, then most kids can do a lot of independent learning. And the other thing that has been a huge challenge for every single one of my kids is getting accommodations. First of all, any kind of neurological, non-measurable difference in terms of, I have Irlen glasses. These are Irlen spectral filters, which I would love everyone to know about. Anyone who has reading issues or attention issues, before you do anything else, or light sensitivity issues, reading comprehension issues, should first, before anything else, check for Irlen Syndrome, because you might have it, IRLEN.com. And lots of people with neurodivergence have it. And all those, it's a light processing problem, and it's easily correctable with colored spectral filters, and everyone gets a different color. I'm not going to get into it too much, other than say that it's something that in first grade, when kids start learning to read, the teacher will notice they're reading slowly. It's something that the kids can get an assessment and not wait until they're at 11th, 12th grade and they failed for many, many years and had lots of remedial instruction that didn't work. The assessment process is not good enough. What happens is kids are assessed for things that are what's wrong with them, what can't they do like everybody else, and they're compared to other people, rather than trying to figure out what's going on. Irlen, if they were tested, actually, they probably figure out. And I had two of my kids with diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, and the minute they had their Irlen glasses, they started reading like immediately. And one was in 11th grade and one was in 5th grade and had remedial instruction that didn't work. So these are things to be aware of, yet there's been no one to talk to in the educational system, because it's not measurable. They want to see numbers. They want to see, your eye doctor says it's okay. Yes, well, it's not picked up in a regular eye exam. And the same thing goes on for any of the neurological things. Auditory processing is the other one that's huge and affects kids in class, and kids who have central auditory processing disorder as the diagnosis. They'll come up normal on a hearing test, but they miss words and they can't follow and they daydream, and it's also often misdiagnosed as ADHD. And it can be checked with an auditory processing test. If they can't hear on a noisy background, they can't decipher what's being said, and they get lost in 5 minutes. They don't know what's going on. Oftentimes the two things go together, which is what my kids have and I have to a degree. So all these sensory things, actually, medical doctors and the educational system, because it's stuff that's not easily measured, they're not interested in learning about. So you can go, wait a minute, you're just sending for didactic assessments, but it's not actually figuring out what the problem is. When they need an acoustics classroom, and they need hearing teachers, and they need a quiet environment, and they need ear and glasses and all this other stuff, it doesn't exist, and no one's interested in learning. And that's been the most frustrating thing for all of us, is to get those accommodations. And also for the one-on-one, like they call it a shadow in America, I don't know, but my son would learn at a regular school. He had a huge gap. He's practically nonverbal. But for social reasons and all the other things, he belonged in a regular school. He's part of the community. There's no reason why. But he needed a one-to-one to help him mediate the information. And there were not enough hours for the entire school day. So I would have to take off 10 hours a week from his schedule that he would hang out at home, because no one was there to support him in class. So these are the kind of difficulties and accommodations: lack of understanding, lack of hours, lack of finances, lack of tools, lack of willingness to learn, and it's got to change.
Jacki, you just nailed it. I mean, across the board, you just nailed it. And if we're going to give shout outs to moms, I'm giving a shout out to my mom right now. She's 79. You guys think I have energy? My mom is the original Tigger. She is 79 and still works full time and is the director of a preschool. And I love what my mom does, because she took the experiences with myself and my sister, and in her preschool, they do early screening for auditory. They do early screening for vision. And, part of my background is in vision science. So when Jacki's talking about Irlen syndrome, there's something that happens in burnout that I think is really important to know. And it's not just something I experience. I have also found in the data and the research that I have done within a very large population with the burnout work that I do, so many of us experience the loss of skills and abilities. And one of those that gets impacted quite often, especially for those of us I have found that are also somewhat dyslexic to a certain degree. If you've got really mild dyslexia, I have mild dyslexia. I also have auditory processing delay. And as we are starting to look at all of these things, because as I said, it is not just our neurodistinct brains, it is our neurodistinct bodies. And so often children get missed as having vision problems. So there's a difference. Your acuity is your 20/20, how clearly your eyes see something. The vision is how your brain processes what your eyes are seeing. And for many of us, there are things that also happen, not just in the visual cortex and processing, but also in our eyes, the physical eye itself. And with stress and strain on our nervous systems, a lot of us can lose the ability to read when we are in burnout. So you might be able to read pretty easily, and then all of a sudden you find it's really a struggle to read a short paragraph. You notice that you keep rereading the same thing, which, I do anyway, but it gets worse. So as you start to notice these things, it can be really scary when that first starts happening or you start to notice it. But those are one of the skills that is impacted during burnout that can show up. And mine comes back when I got in restoration. And if I would go down, to lower levels of burnout, I might have been in a 4 or 5 and I slide down to a 3 or a 2, then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can read again. It was still in short bursts. So just know that, if you are experiencing these things, or if you have a child and they are in school and you're noticing all of a sudden they're having a really hard time reading, there might be a reason. There might be something you need to look at that isn't the acuity, but is the vision. So thank you so much for bringing those up.
If I can just add one word about that.
Yeah.
The Irlen is something that's processing white lights, and most classes have all the wrong lighting. It's fluorescent light, whiteboards, and all this other stuff. And the ability to read actually deteriorates as time goes on. There's like the 10-minute rule, I think they call it. So you can read for a few minutes, and then the light starts creating too much blood flow to the brain, and then all your senses get overloaded. So you can also get migraines, and you can also get, and if you have it usually with APD and all this other stuff, the whole system gets tripped. It's like a circuit breaker getting tripped. So if you check first that, then it will prevent, as the day goes on, the kids deteriorate more and more. And I could tell you that I have Irlen after my brain surgery, and when I would be looking at somebody's face, suddenly it would melt. Or, the words would start moving all over the page, or the sidewalks would go up. And kids won't tell you that because they don't know, because that's the reality. They don't know there's something wrong with their visual perception. And that's 70% of our perception is visual. So it's very, very important to just try and assess if there's something going on and it's not picked up on a regular test, as you said.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for adding that in. Simon, what are some of the accessibility barriers you experienced in education? And what are some of the things that, you've experienced that you want to start changing?
Well, I'm for me, I'm a late diagnosis myself for autism. 39, I was diagnosed. But when I reflect on how life has been up to that point, and in particular within the education years, it actually answers quite a lot of questions. And because I struggle with social communication and being part of friendship groups and things. So I found myself quite a bit on my own, and or I'd have like one friend who I really sort of put heart and soul into, and it was and I used to get bullied quite a bit. And I think something that my parents did that was life changing was actually introduce me into martial arts. And I started training in a martial arts called Tang Soo when I was 8 years old. And I got my black belt at 11, and I got really into it. And it was kind of my escape. So all the frustrations and things that I was having in school with friendship groups and getting along with people, I was able to channel that into my training and practice. So I was able to keep a really good balance on things, and the bullying started to start to stop. Start to stop, two different words there. But anyway, the bullying disappeared, and it wasn't because I was fighting them off or anything. It was just because I became much more confident in myself to not be affected by it. Yes, I'm different, but so, and I was able to sort of just be me a little bit more, and that really was life-changing. And I carried that on for quite some time, and I trained for about 30 years in total. And it wasn't until I got to it was sixth form, so age 16, 17, that a chemistry teacher spotted that I was having major difficulties with balancing chemical equations because I was constantly getting letters the wrong way around. I think she was quite fearful I was going to invent some dangerous chemical, to be honest. But she noticed I was having serious trouble with it, and it was what's one thing that I was complaining about was that things were moving around the page, and as Jacki was saying, it's a trait of Irlen Syndrome. And I was getting migraines quite a bit as well, and the way I was getting migraines is because when I'm reading black text on white and I'm reading left to right, I'm strobing my brain, and that's what was causing the migraines. So then I've got spectral filters myself, and they filter out the wavelengths. So then that way I'm not strobing. And it was shortly after that when I still picked up that I was having working memory difficulties and struggling with keeping attention in the class. And I would look inattentive. That started sort of thinking a bit more about dyslexia at that point. And then that's when I was diagnosed at university with dyslexia. And I think the education system then wasn't as knowledgeable as it is now. It has a bit more awareness of neurodivergent traits, but still sort of trying to get past that good intentions and into implementation and start actually making some changes. And one thing that as an educator myself, I've gone through teacher training, and there's a story as well that I struggled with essays massively and at the university, because my degree is a maths degree, and so there was a lot more about problem solving rather than writing lengthy essays. I'm going off on a tangent here. So anyway, when I wrote the essays, I was really the practical teaching bit of it I was very good at, but the essays bit I really struggled at. And I intercepted a message that my tutor at the time, who had marked my assignments, sent to the exam board, which said that Simon won't produce anything better than this. And that at first frustrated me. But again, thanks to my martial arts background and thanks for the building up there, my response instead of crumbling was, "Want to bet?" And I did it. And I'm thankful I've had a good career so far to date, and it's been turbulent the last 10 years for personal reasons. And I think things have improved on that front for me. But going back to educating, when going through teacher training, we're generally taught how to plan lessons, and it tends to be for the neurotypical. It tends to be for the majority. And then we think of these bolt-on activities or bolt-on support mechanisms into these lessons to support. And that's not inclusion, that's integration. And I think there's a big...
Oh my gosh, right there. It's not inclusion, it's integration. Right there, folks, in lesson planning. Keep going.
It is. and I think it has, there's got to be some consideration about how we develop the way we plan our lessons, because it's kind of cater for everybody, as opposed to sort of cater for the majority and then we'll add some extra bits in. And that's a lot harder work. You have to do a lot more work to do it that way. If you take an inclusive approach, look at the strengths and challenges of all the students in the class, and then plan around those needs, you can build resources that everybody can benefit. Because the way that neurodivergent children learn, can be of benefit to neurotypicals too. It won't harm a neurotypical child. And I just think that that's something that I think needs much more thinking about. But as an education sector as a whole, they're themselves under a lot of pressure from government policies and the economic climate. And schools in the UK are, in my opinion, massively underfunded. And so the resources that they need, they can't necessarily get hold of, because they know that they want to be able to do something, but they don't have the time or the resources in which to do it because of the conditions that are imposed on them. And I think that's a real shame and a real missed opportunity for the economy, because a lot of our neurodivergent children are struggling to reach their full potential, where they can do some absolutely incredible things. And my daughter's is an example. My daughter's 11. She was diagnosed autism at 9 years old, and we had to go private there. Otherwise, we'd be waiting a very, very long time. By which time, during the education years, there's a lot of missed opportunity for her. And she's really struggled, especially after the pandemic. And she became a school refuser. And a lot of her worries and issues are around how other children perceive her. And she does feel like she's bullied, and she does get bullied, and she doesn't want to go back again, and I can understand that. But when we do get to a point where we're trying to encourage her to go back, her mental health starts to deteriorate quite rapidly, and then we got to the point where she's pulling hair out of her head. And so, we had to obviously act on that very, very quickly. And she got the support she needed, counselling, for one. So she got to speak to people that are not her parents, because that's sort of gives her a chance. And she's got to the point now where she feels she doesn't need that now. She's happy. She's using a Chewy when she gets anxious. And so we're partway there now, and of getting the right kind of education. But there's systemic barriers are a real major issue for the education sector, that do want to do something different or want to get into making these different, but they're just under so much pressure to meet performance targets and inspectors' expectations, and it's that is in itself the core barrier, is the system itself. It needs, like Jacki was saying, needs a complete overhaul.
Oh my goodness, could not agree more. There is a fabulous book that my combustion crew, we are a group of educators and advocates in education, that we read together, and it's called Outwitting the Devil. And it is a really powerful book that looks at and dives in to our very broken education system. And it's really just one I couldn't recommend enough. It's called Outwitting the Devil. And I'll make sure I drop that in the show notes below. So, I saw everybody kind of light up, Simon, when you mentioned martial arts. And it's very interesting because, our nervous systems, our sensory systems need regulation. We tend to be more dysregulated because of our environments, especially when we're talking about lighting and sound and all of the things that send our nervous system into overdrive. And physical activity, to any degree in which you're able, is very helpful in sort of regulating our nervous system. And one of your countrymen and a good friend of mine, Thomas Henley, is a phenomenal martial arts competitor. He's also a fantastic autistic advocate. If you don't know Thomas Henley, go check him out on Instagram. I absolutely love the work that he's doing, and he does a lot of his martial arts stuff too. So Simon, I think you got a lot of martial arts cheering going on, because that is, for me, I found that running, and I was never someone who was a runner before in my life until I was 42, and that became something I started doing. And I think, when we were talking about this very broken system, which we can all acknowledge, yes, this is broken. I think we also have to look at what are we working with? Is this the fact? Are we trying to put lipstick on the pig, as we say here in the United States, right? And sometimes we have to be willing to step into the fact that right now what we have is broken. There is no fixing it. So we need to dismantle it and we need to start fresh. And that is a really scary thing. I think on a lot of different levels, I think we look at it, like you mentioned, Simon, financially. We look at it as what is the impact? How do we do this? How do we transition from a system that isn't terribly broken? How do we do this? This is a massive undertaking. And I think the more we can just start these conversations, the better. As we move to our next advocate, Carrin Gilmore, I want to just highlight something that Carrin has. She is the director, as she mentioned, of accessibility and accommodations for the NeuroDrive team of education. And, here in the United States, we're all talking about one of the biggest barriers to accessibility is the accommodations. And here in the United States, we have something called an IEP, an individualized education plan. And Carrin has developed and created a phenomenal and very empowering course to help parents and students apply and learn more about the IEP programs, the different types of meetings, and we will have our wait list available and open so that you can start diving in and getting that support that you need. And it's a wonderful thing because Carrin has created one specifically if you have a high school senior this year who is about to graduate, and my son is graduating on May the 12th. I am so tickled to death. My baby will be graduating. This is a big thing. And if you need a transition from high school to college, because a transition meeting for your IEP is going to help you get set up for college with your accommodations in place. So, Carrin, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about accessibility in education, my friend. Take it away.
Well, first, I want to say I agree with everyone who's spoken thus far. I like to think of things in what's called the macro, the big scale, and then you kind of break it down. So, like big scale wise, our system's broken. Jackie's correct. It's not just one state, it's not just one country, but across the world. Our system historically is based on teachers. I myself was a speducator and educator. I substitute now, but something I found is it's what's called we call in the business teacher centric. Anywhere in the I've gone internationally for different worlds versions or countries versions of IEPs. Because countries have them a lot of the time. And parents are like, what do I do, Corinne? And I'm like, okay, well, let me learn this new country, this new law. And, you know, the Western civilization, quote unquote, we have what laws to back us up. Some places don't. And I will say, when it comes to a worldwide view, back in the day, when it comes to education, they throw us in an insane asylum. So at least we've, as messed up as it sounds, devil advocates wise, we've made a little progress, right? We're not thrown there anymore. It's like a duh factor, right? So now we have all these people, we have to work with them. How? Education is the first time in a government agency across the world you have to learn how to work with people who are neurodivergent. Some people refuse, some people are, And as a speducator, I learned quickly there's a spectrum, just like of disabilities and of people, because with people think, oh, there's disability, they're one thing. It's inaccurate. Most autistic people, there's a study, I forget where it was from, but it was like 80% of us are what's called autism with what's called a comorbid or a autism and that's what you guys have all addressed thus far, right? We're autistic and we're this, we're autistic and the problem is the ands impact our autism. Our autism impacts the ands. And so as an educator, you have a loud classroom. I cannot even begin to tell you the horror stories of those lights and me as a teacher and as a student. Buzzing. There's always a buzz. Get out of my ear, like bees is what I used to tell people. So knowing that as an educator, it really impacted me how I taught. And so we're going to go into the system. The system is definitely broken, right? And here's the problem. Where? Is it the corruption? Is it money? Is it the standards? Is it all the above? How come I know some teachers that are phenomenal, like Simon said, we can't be supported. You know, like, so accessibility and education for me comes really in these different angles. I as an educator, I as a student, um, and I as an advocate coming into IEPs, because they all three are sadly different. As an IEP advocate, I have to empower my parents and my students to be like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just different, and that's okay. It's different, not less. And so you talk to them, and they're beaten down, because they're constantly being told how less they are. I mean, a lot of people I know dislike the term disability because if you look in English, dis is the prefix of inability to, right? And so like that's kind of the whole structure of the system. So when it comes to that, I mean, I have written almost a doctoral on how to change the education system here in the United States because it is something that really needs to be hit. And that's where it becomes a problem though. So you have all these educators who I agree with Simon. Most of the educators I know, great intentions. They want to help, but the implementation's a problem, right? They're like, I want to help. How? And no one has the how. Like you go through these teacher programs, and I remember the only reason I got through my teacher program was because of an incredible person named Danny Nuss. He works at University of the Pacific, and I was told by at the time because I was going to teach English only, and then I got wrapped into SPED because that just happens, and my life especially. I had professors going, I don't think Corinne could teach because she's autistic. We know it's not a legal thing to say, but under the record in the down low, she's gonna have a really tough time with classroom management. Now, educators in America and California specifically, because every state has different ways of credentialing or making us an official educator. Here in California, we have a more rigorous one, and it's called the TPA. Now, there's an EdTPA across the United States, but it's all varied. I won't get you guys into that because it'll go poof, and it's a nightmare. But long story short, with this varied variation, right, you get varied teachers. So they have teachers like me who they're like, she can't do classroom management. And on the EdTPA, there's a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is should not teach. 5 is, whoa, you're a 5-year, 10-year teacher. I scored 4s on all my classroom management. And I remember wanting to flip off the professor. Like he said, right? Like Simon was like, I was like, oh, yeah? You said I can't do what? Oh, yeah. So when I have my students do that, I tell them the same thing. I'm like, prove them wrong. And they're like, what? I'm like, prove me wrong. I said, like, help me out, prove me wrong. Because it's not about me as a teacher, it's about the student. And that's where it comes into the system. Accessibility is changing the system instead of being teacher-centric, money-centric, standard-centric, all these different things, student. The student has to be center. The student has to come first. And I say student because it's gender neutral, right? And little boys, little girls, every child in the system needs to come first. And that is essentially the problem. And my own childhood is funny. I was diagnosed at 18 months, which is the golden standard. And Faiza brought up this amazing point. It is not just racial. It is not. It is social economic. Okay, we got race issues. We got social economic issues. We got society, cultural standards. I really struggled coming out with my autism because of that too. I didn't want to be that labeled, Temple Grandin kind of person because I used to always be compared to her when I was a kid. They're like, oh, you're supposed to be like Temple. And I was like, I'm not Temple. Thanks, though. Meeting Temple changed my world because she's actually really cool. So I wish I was more like her. But that's kind of my point, though. You have this idea of like, people kind of blame teachers. They're like, well, teachers aren't trying hard enough. Teachers aren't doing this. And I'm like, I think it's a systematic issue. Especially for parents, that's the direct person they're dealing with a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong, I'm dealt with some horrible teachers, horrible ones. But overall, my overarching feel I have found is give us how, right? We're exhausted. I only have so much I can do. I have a classroom of 35 to 45 kids. How can I help the kids that are different? And I always tell people that approach that Simon talked about. It really is about like how you can integrate accommodations into every lesson plan. And in the United States, we call it multiple modals. That means that you're having the kids standing up, you have them, walking around the classroom, you have them singing, you have them doing multiple ways to learn the same information. And it is so funny watching older educators go, oh, isn't this incredible, Corinne? And I'm like, I had 3 courses in my teacher program. So our teacher programs give us a lot of this, I call it hype. Here's all these dream things you could do. And then you go into the classroom and it's like, because they don't teach you that. I mean, it was like really hitting a wall. I got in so much trouble at my first job because they're like, Corinne, you're too accommodating. How do we know the kids are meeting the standards when you're too accommodating of them? And I was like, that's a thing? So I always tell people that like our system is broken in the sense of, you know, yeah, and I'm sorry, Jackie said it best. There really is not enough neurodiversity training either. All my friends come to me. They're like, Corinne, I need help. I have an IEP. And I can't tell you how many teachers have called me as a teacher like gen ed or in like, case manager going, Crit, I need your help. Crit, I need your help. So that's why I said it's not a lack of wanting, it's a lack of training, a lack of actual implementation. You give us all these ideas, you tell us Vygotsky, Piaget, all these great, amazing philosophies, right? Well, how do we actually implement them in my class where I have 30 kids and one child? Bless their little heart, though. It just can't sit. Like he does the assignment, but he's going in circles the whole time, and he's going around distracting all his peers because he's actually super sweet and social, And that's what I tell people. I'm like, it's a rough system because the one we're in right now traps us all in a classroom, and you can only do so much in these classes. And some classes are tiny, others are huge. Some are old churches. Another I worked at is a old law office, and then the third one was an old courthouse. So, kind of try to figure out like how do we, as people, really like help these kids? Isn't just a student issue or a parent issue; it's a teacher one too. And so I always try to bring up and uplift that teacher voice. And so I feel ultimately at the end of the day, our system needs reformation in the sense of what is implementable, what is actual, and how do we support our teachers so they can support our kids instead of having to worry about the 50 other things teachers are supposed to do, like attendance, calling parents, making sure they do punishment. I mean, there's a lot of tasks. A friend of mine, when we were in my program for my master's degree in SPED, did this, and there are over 100 tasks teachers are assigned to do a day. It's not fair. So that's where I think it's just a lot of these higher ups, I don't want to trash school boards, but they take a lot of money and they don't do a lot of work. And so how do we address that, right? Like, how do we systematically change a system that will not reform itself? Ultimately, what horrifies me is in college, a couple of my friends, neurodiverse friends, and I did a survey. We discovered most of us that were considered, excuse my ableist label, but it is the DSM thing, high functioning, we were all socioeconomically very more wealthy because our parents could afford to provide services. Here in the state of California, which is considered an extremely progressive state, by the way, we have things called regional centers. My other job, Disability Voices United, is working on a law to reform them because they're supposed to provide the services schools can't, and they don't even do that. So, I mean, myself, for example, I've been waiting to get services again for 2 years. Some kids have waited 8 years. So you have a 16-year-old now who needed services documented how many years ago. So I I love, thank you, Simon. But I think that is because I want to talk to Simon too. He's awesome. But I feel like I think that is something like needs to happen because there's not enough neurodivergent voices. And it's not, I'm tired of the blame game. You get a lot in education, pointing fingers. It's like, let's come up with solutions instead of pointing fingers. So I'll end it on that because how do you make education accessible? You include everyone, and that includes the staff, the principal, right? The supports needed to support our kids. So yeah, I think that making sure we support everyone involved in every country, right? And making sure we are aware of these things helps us out. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I love the course that you've created because I've gotten to bear witness to the creation of this and the process. And it has been really beautiful because, my children had IEPs. And so there was so much that I didn't know. There's so much that you're not told as a parent. They just throw these things at you. You don't even get like a booklet to explain what the heck it is or how to navigate it. It's almost like you get thrown in that IEP meeting and you're just sink or swim, folks, figure it out. And when we're talking about, teachers have 100 tasks a day, students do as well. And so we're not just talking about the chronic epidemic of burnout within the workforce. We're talking about the chronic epidemic of burnout within our education system, our students and our educators. Because as we all have, I think, agreed on this, you don't go into education as a career. It is a vocation. It is something you choose of your heart. It is something that you are passionately connected to. And I think it's so important to talk about those things. I love that we're running a little bit over today, guys, and I apologize. I try and honor everybody's time, especially because our global panel is all over the world and it's super late where you guys are. Faiza, I really want you to be able to share what are some of the accessibility things that you have found in education, and especially within the system that you have there in Pakistan, and what are some ways that you are talking about or wanting to change or help change the accessibility that you've seen barriers?
Well, to be honest, I must say that we need emergency kind of a model at the moment, because there is not a proper system implemented here, and we need a dire need. There's a dire need of scanning uh, children, adults through their conditions, and not everyone can afford them. But if somebody suspects anything, the special needs should incorporate then and there rather than delaying that time. And I personally feel that there is a lot of discrimination when with autistic children, when they have speech delay, and the mainstream schools refuse to take them on the board, and they send them to special needs school most of the time, and there they got misfit again, because they have potential to do other things and they don't feel belong there. So the other thing which is uh, difficult for the parents at the moment is to hire a resource teacher. When there is when they got a child with spectrum or any other condition, they have to pay for the resource teacher, and those resource teachers are mostly not trained enough. There are kind of behavioral therapies going on, and uh, there is no protocols standards at the moment where we can identify that if they are doing the legit therapies, or uh, they are not uh, treating child in a way that they can't be themselves, that they start masking, and they are not being genuine who they are, and it affects a lot of confidence and the child communication in these aspects. And I think parents are overburdened at the moment, because they are the first people in the whole generations at this point to know that their child is into all these conditions, and they have to step forward with the school. They have to talk about all these conditions, and they have to pay for all the things privately. The speech therapist, occupational therapist, each and everything they have to pay privately. So, so at the moment, what I feel that there is an emergency plan we need to execute here, and because when we say like the people, the children who doesn't come up with their symptoms on early stage, people consider them that they have no issues with them, because there's a lack of awareness, and still the teachers need to get empowered. The whole system needs to get empowered with this perspective, and I think there's a lot we have to do at the moment.
Yes, there is. And I think we are off to a really phenomenal start with all of the insights, suggestions, and transformational ideas that this fantastic panel of advocates has shared today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for staying up late for some of you. Thank you for swinging in early for my friend on the West Coast. And so we have a couple of things out there I would love to invite our audience to join in. Over on YouTube, I have a poll out asking what area of accessibility you have faced the most barriers. Has it been in education? Has it been in the workplace? Has it been in healthcare? Or has it been in public spaces and beyond? We've got a lot of votes that have already trickled in. That same poll will be out on LinkedIn in just a little bit. Please make sure you go vote. We want to make sure that these conversations for the places that have presented the most accessibility barriers for you are being talked about, and the issues and the challenges that are being faced by our community every day that are draining our energy, that are taxing our resources, both energetically and financially. Because, when we talk about accessibility, one of the biggest things that usually comes up in the conversation, especially when we're talking about accommodations in the workplace, is I hear it's going to cost a lot. Education, we usually hear the same thing. Oh, that's going to be expensive. We don't have the budget for that. We don't have the resources. And when we're looking at those things, we have to really get real about it. Let's look at accommodations. Let's look and see what those accommodations look like. I will guarantee you that accommodation, that adjustment that's needed for that person is free or very low cost. I think that when we throw the fact out there that we're afraid it's going to break our budget, we are afraid to stop and look at what's actually required. We're just simply playing gatekeeper, and that's not serving anybody, folks. Stick around as we are talking about connection, as we're talking about thriving, as we're talking about unmasking. One of the most beautiful things that I'm a part of is the XXO Connect Live platform, and I am live every Thursday. So today at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, you can join me on XXO for live neurodivergent, neurodistinct conversations. Ask questions, come learn more about burnout, and start your burnout restoration journey. And hey, I've got a gift for you. Thanks for hanging around to the end. Check out the link below if you'd like to start your first steps to burnout restoration today. As part of the Shine a Light campaign this month, I'm offering $100 off to get started. Be sure you get the link below. Thank you to all of our wonderful advocates today, and all of their information will be in the show notes below. Ian has a fantastic show, and Jacki has a wonderful book, and all of our advocates here have courses. They have ways that you can connect and work with them. I know Simon does a lot of consulting work. We have some phenomenal things. Faiza has a group that she's running. We want to connect you with each and every one of these amazing advocates as we shine a light on the work they are doing. Thank you to each and every one of you. And be sure to check out Janelle Johnson, this year's winner of her service to others as part of the Shine a Light Autistic Advocate campaign. We are so thrilled to be part of the conversation that is helping to change how education is showing up in our world and how it's not. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining in the conversation, and keep this going. Go follow these amazing advocates. See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Burnout. Burnout is when our needs and sensory profile needs go consistently unmet. This is usually where the resources, help, encouragement, and support disappear for us, and we're left wading through social media feeds or Google searching for assistance, only to compound our exhaustion and overwhelm, and still not finding the strategies we need from someone who has a framework and also has a neurodistinct brain and body to guide us into burnout restoration. Well, not anymore. Hi, I'm Carol Jean. I'm a late identified autistic ADHD dyslexic adult, and I am in year 3+ of living burnout, shutdown, and meltdown free after 40 years on the chronic cycle burnout loop. I didn't even know this place of thrive and mental clarity and sustainable energy was possible. You didn't get into burnout overnight, and you won't get out of it overnight either. I wish I could wave my magic wand and make that happen. This isn't a quick fix. This process does take your commitment, but you aren't alone, and you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. You're already light years ahead of where I started over 9 years ago, when I was all alone and white knuckling through every step, trying to figure it out all on my own because there wasn't any help or anyone to reach out to at that time. My solo journey to burnout restoration gave birth to the unveiling method. I went from masking at what I call the professional level of camouflaging and decades of living on the chronic cycle burnout loop to thriving and no longer falling back into that burnout restoration illusion trap. I discovered the path and strategies no one ever told me to living life as my wonderfully wired self, and a way to flourish in a world that isn't always geared towards our indie brains and sensory profile needs.
The Unveiling Method Burnout to Thriving Journey is here to help you get off the chronic cycle burnout loop too, and do it in your authentic and unique way, with your sensory profile needs being met and unveiling the thriving best you. No one has the same exact needs and sensory profile, and those both fluctuate and change depending on many factors. But when you have the tools to identify what needs are going unmet and what sensory profile needs are presenting at the moment, you have two powerful tools that make a huge difference in your burnout restoration journey. The Unveiling Method, Burnout to Thriving, is a 4-phase journey. And in this first step, you have access to those two powerful tools that help you identify your unique and authentic needs and those unmet needs right now, along with your individual sensory profile. Your sensory profile is different when you are in burnout versus when you are in your thrive. Knowing what needs are going unmet and having a clear and defined list that allows you to see the areas of need you may have been feeling for decades, but weren't able to pinpoint in this first step to restoration. You know, ND burnout is really complex. It's different than a neuromajority burnout. Begin your burnout restoration today with help, resources, and encouragement in those first two huge and key elements with tools to help break that down so that you have a clear list of your unmet needs right now and your unique sensory profile needs to begin your burnout restoration. This self-paced course of the Unveiling Method will provide you with these two tools to assess your unique list of unmet needs and your current sensory profile so that you can begin putting supports in place to get your needs and sensory profile needs met. Because remember, that's the key. Those inconsistent unmet needs and sensory profile needs lead to burnout. This will also help you have a clear and easy way to share your needs with those you're in relationship with. Being able to share what you need. Be able to identify and pinpoint your needs and sensory profile needs through these unique Unveiling Method tools that will help you throughout your burnout restoration journey. This isn't a one-time thing. You can use these forever. The needs reflection and sensory profile reflection tools allow you to see areas of your life you may have felt for years, but not been able to identify, or areas of need you didn't even know were part of your human need list. There's 30 of them, by the way. This is a powerful 2-element approach that will change the way you see yourself and how you view your needs and sensory profile. You have needs. You have a right to have your needs met. Your needs are not too much. You don't have to earn rest or support. They are your right. You are already worthy of having your needs met. Get these two powerful tools to burnout restoration in this self-paced course, along with insights, coaching videos, audio versions for listening on the go, the needs reflection tool, the sensory profile reflection tool, and a bonus tool to help you begin implementing support for your needs with my powerful Get Out of the Thinking Traps tool. So you can unveil those thinking traps that make asking for help and setting those healthy boundaries harder than they ever need to be. This self-paced First Steps course to burnout restoration includes 2 bonus tools and modules. Bonus 1 is Get Out of the Thinking Traps. Bonus 2 is Self-Care Actions for Indie Humans. Sign up today, and during the month of April, all the way through April 30th, you will get $100 off this self-paced course. Go to the link in the show notes below, get signed up, and get started on your burnout restoration today. You don't have to wait. I look forward to seeing you in the course. And hey, be sure to check out the Unveilers community. Once you become a member of the First Steps to Burnout Restoration, you get access to the Unveilers community support group as well. And there is a wonderful 30-day access pass in the course for you there. So this is Power Pack full of the tools to help you get started on burnout restoration today. Come join me, get that Shine a Light $100 discount right now.